Have we mistranslated Genesis verses 1 through 3 wrong this whole time? Well, Michael Heiser, he's about to explain it all, and he's going to dissect the verses in its original Hebraic form. So let's go ahead and give this video a watch. Let's roll the tape.
That's the way we're supposed to look at it. Now, traditionally, that is how Genesis 1 through 3 has been understood. 2 is the result of verse 1. That's the traditional interpretation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is viewed as the first creative act. God does something in verse 1. The result of that are the conditions we see in verse 2. The writer kind of lets us know what the result of God's creating in verse 1 was. And then he moves on to God getting down to business in verse 3. Okay, so God creates the heavens and the earth. And oh, by the way, when he did that, the earth was formless and empty, and all these conditions. And then God said, let there be light, and we get down to business.
So that's what we
that's
believed
the traditional
this
way
whole time.
Of looking at it.
Traditionally.
So we have independent clauses in verses 1 and 3, and dependent in 2, and the dependent is the result. That's the relationship. So here I have grayed out in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's the translation we're used to. But now let's play around a little bit. What if I translated it this way? When God began to create the heavens and the earth, you said, well, that's cheating. You can't do that. Yes, I can. I have a PhD in Hebrew. I can do whatever.
He knows what he knows.
No, seriously, if you look in the Jewish Publication Society translation of Genesis 1:1, that's it. When God began to create the heavens and the earth. Now, is that a complete thought or an incomplete thought? That one's certainly incomplete because it's prepping something to follow. You're being prepped as a reader. So when you put the word when in front of it, you know that it's just leading to something. It's not an independent thought or act. It's leading to one that you haven't gotten to yet. Now let's put them side by side, or I'll get there eventually. We have in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Again, that's the traditional translation that most of us are used to. Yep. Hebrew, of course, was not written with any vowels. I have added a vowel here in red. If I was a Hebrew scribe using the vowel system that was invented at around the 8th century AD, those are the only vowels we have, those little dots and squiggles that you see on a Hebrew text, the vowel system. If I wanted to be sure that my reader would understand I'm talking about the beginning, in the beginning, I would use that little mark that looks like a capital T. And it would be pronounced Ba-Reshit. That's called in Hebrew the definite article. Just like English definite article, the word for the. Now, if I wanted to opt for when God began, it would look this way. It would be 2 dots underneath. And that means there is no definite article. It's a vocal cue that we don't have a definite article here. That would be Be-Reshit. Which one do you think is in your Hebrew Bible? The Hebrew Bible that like everybody uses now, that has come down to us from centuries ago. The Dead Sea Scrolls do not have vowels. Vowels only start again in the Middle Ages. Which one do you think we get in Hebrew texts that have vowels? It's Be-Reshit. The translation, when God began to create, is a completely legitimate translation. So let's go back here.
That's so interesting.
We got 2 possible translations. If we opt for the when translation, now look, I've changed the colors. Now we have dependent clauses. We don't have a series of independent ideas. We have 2 full verses of clauses that are leading up to something. Yeah. And that
They're
something is verse 3.
other.
And that is the main idea. That's the independent thought. So here, just think about it. Read along with me or in your mind, and just think about how it sounds. When God began to create the heavens and the earth, now the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. It really has a different feel. It sounds like everything in verses 1 and 2 are just prep. They're not really happening. They're the writer describing what conditions, now catch this, the writer is describing conditions that already exist before God actually creates anything, before God actually speaks anything into existence. In other words, you have a situation where verses 1 and 2 lead to verse 3, and they set it up. The first creative act, the first thing God does in Genesis 1 through 3, in this view, is not verse 1. It's verse 3.
3.
That's the very first thing that God speaks into existence. For lack of a better term, I couldn't think of anything that's very witty or alliterated. I put Hebrew syntax view, because this is strict Hebrew syntax. Syntax is sentence structure, sentence relationships. If you're going to just go by what the Hebrew says, like a zealot, strictly, obeying the rules of Hebrew grammar, that is what you get.
I love the way Michael Heiser explained it, but I want to look at these verses together because, it says in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And that's still a valid translation. Yes, that's how it's read. Awesome, right? Use it still. But he's also validating the fact that we can say that this says when God began to create the heavens and the earth. So what that means is God was going to create the heavens and the earth, right? He already did. But when he was going to create the heavens and the earth, it's now explaining what he was doing before he began to create the heavens and the earth. What was God doing? Well, he was hovering over the surface of the deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Why? Because the earth was formless and it was empty, right? Our creation, what we know, what our creation, humans on earth, it was formless and empty. It wasn't even a thing yet. So God was hovering over the waters right before he was about to bring light into existence out of nothing. What's also interesting to point out is back in that time, the term waters didn't just mean a body of water or an ocean, but the Hebrews refer to waters as also meaning the sky or the ocean, or not the oceans, the sky or space or the heavens. Why do I say this? Because further on in Genesis, we see that God separates the waters from the waters, meaning God separates the bodies of water on earth from the waters in the sky, in the heavens, in space, right? He separates it by the firmament. What I'm trying to say here is God here, the Spirit of God, isn't hovering over a physical body of water. Now, this is just like a theory of mine, right? It could mean he actually was, but it also could mean that he was hovering over void, over nothing, over the waters of space, over nothing. And before he's about to say, "Let there be light," this is what God was doing. He was in darkness, but he was the only light in that darkness. And then he says, "Let there be light." Isn't that amazing right there? So what does this mean now for us? Well, I think it's cool because now the science is catching up with the Bible. Why do I say that? Because the Big Bang is something scientists believed, and well, they still believe, that that's how the universe was created. Light out of nowhere, energy came out of nowhere, and it created everything. But the Bible supports that now, supports this theory of the Big Bang, that God did create something out of nothing. That light came out of darkness, and God separated the light from the dark, the good from the evil, the night from the day, and he called the light good and the dark bad, the dark evil. It's so amazing. It's so amazing now that we can see Genesis in a new light just by simply translating it in its original Hebrew form, something that we've missed out on. And it makes me think, is there any other verses in the Bible that maybe we've been misinterpreting, or there's a lack of interpretation maybe for some other verses in the Bible where maybe we could see some other verses in a new light, in a way we've never seen before, because we're simply missing interpretation, simply missing context. What do you guys think? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. I want to know your guys' thoughts on this. What does this mean for us? Isn't it cool? It's amazing. I love Michael Heiser and his work. I'm going to leave the link to the video down below. But that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. Comment down below. I want to know what you think. And we'll see you in the next one.